this particular stage because I see you've got lights here and it'll shine in my face. So I got to figure out the most optimal place to brief from. I am prone to prancing about and kind of stalking the stage. That's just how I do things. But I'm Bill Stebbins. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel. I was in the U.S. Army for 23 years, active duty. Not knowing the audience, that can sometimes be fraught with peril. You just don't know. What I will say, without saying a lot, and we can talk afterwards if you wish to deep dive that particular issue more, is that, and because we're talking about Bitcoin, we're not talking about me, but we need to know a little bit about me to understand where I'm coming at with Bitcoin, if that makes sense. So once upon a time, a young Bill Stebbins was commissioned into the U.S. Army as an armor officer. So that's tanks, M1 tanks. And I did that because I wanted to serve the country. I wanted to defend the United States. Naive, young. And so I do that. As I serve, I go to Macedonia. I go to Bosnia for peacekeeping missions. Then I go to Iraq twice. And as I'm going to these different deployments, what I'm starting to see doesn't really level with what I thought I joined the Army for, which was to defend the nation. And so, especially when Iraq came around, I really went there to see exactly what are we doing over in Iraq, et cetera, in the Middle East. And is it aligning with defending the nation, keeping things more tranquil, keeping things more peaceful? Again, I'm not going to go into great detail on that. What I will say at the end of the day is I was selected for higher level command. I turned it down. And I retired from the Army. I left because my values didn't align with what I saw with the military writ large. And so we can talk offline about that. So as those scales are falling from my eyes, and I'm seeing that, and I'm also seeing what the United States is doing overseas, then I start hearing about Bitcoin here and there. It would just ping my radar. Every once in a while, I would hear a little something, I'd blow it off. Not interested, it just didn't register. Kept hearing about it more and more. And then my son-in-law, about 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago, brought it up again, said, oh, you really need to read this book and look at this video, etc. And so in the military, I told you that I was an armor officer, so that's tanks. But another aspect of what I did in the military, I went for training there to be a planner, all the way from tactics to strategic planning. And so when I was in Baghdad for my first tour, I was one of the operational planners for the lead general over there in Baghdad during the surge. And again, you don't necessarily care about that. But I became very enamored with planning and critical thinking and deep diving and really challenging things that I believe, because I think this is the only way to yourself to be free, is to challenge everything that you think and not be nervous about challenging very closely held beliefs that you have. Because if they're sound, they'll stand up to scrutiny. If they're not, they'll crash and burn. And probably this is a good thing. It's not easy. Sometimes it's very painful to do that. Okay, so as Bitcoin hits my radar screen and I really want to look at Bitcoin, now I'm assaulting it mentally, trying to deconstruct it, trying to find its weaknesses, its vulnerabilities, to pick it apart. But I became more and more convinced that there really is something there to Bitcoin. And it's more than just wealth preservation, which I found amazing, because if it was only about wealth preservation, it wouldn't appeal to me that much. But I found that it means much more than that. And so you have now the background, a little bit of a brief synopsis. Look, I have 30 minutes to brief. You can't even get warmed up in 30 minutes. So I'm going to try to accelerate and distill out the decent points here but be patient with me and maybe a little gracious if I don't flesh it out quite as brilliantly as like in my mind I'd like to do. All right, so you have my background. But here's the problem. What I want to talk about today is I think that there's a problem. Looking at it from a military lens, looking at it from critical analysis, critical thinking. I think that there's a problem, and I want to talk about the problem because I want to walk you through this thing that I'm calling disruptive meta events. And if one of these hits, now what does your Bitcoin do for you? I don't own any Bitcoin, in case it's being recorded. I have no idea. I don't personally own it. But what would my Bitcoin do for me in light of one of these events? And then what do we do about it? Because no one likes someone to bring a problem and then not have some kind of a solution to the problem. Maybe it's not the best solution, but an idea. So let's jump right into this. This is me. In a nutshell, these slides will be posted. I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on this. But in those 18 months of deep dive in the problem of Bitcoin and analyzing it, I thought, you know what? This really captured my imagination. And so I ended up writing 3 articles for Bitcoin Magazine just recently. They got published. The last one there was the one in the middle, Beyond Bukele. That's another topic. However, as I looked at it, this is the problem. I'm writing an article on this, but this is a distillation of it. You can read that. No one likes things read verbatim to them, so I won't subject you to that. But this is the problem in a nutshell. You find Bitcoin. You deep dive Bitcoin. You say, my goodness, this is something amazing. Then you get excited. You get borderline euphoric about it. And then you start thinking, this can solve everything. This can fix it. And you see that phrase a lot, don't you? Bitcoin fixes this. Bitcoin fixes that. I don't think it does. Now, don't hate on me if I don't necessarily like that quip so much. Because, again, I believe in challenging paradigms, challenging commonly held quips. But I'd ask you to really think about, what does it fix? Because if we're going to say that Bitcoin fixes this or that, and it's applied to almost anything under the sun, well, have we really diagnosed the core issues of the evils in society today? Why governments grab for power, more and more power, more and more. They're insatiable. It's never enough. Is the fiat currency, the fiat system, is that the root cause? Or can you go deeper? Is there a further root deeper than that? And fiat is just the enabling tool that they're using. And so I think that the problem is we have an overly naive, and I don't mean naive in being pejorative towards anyone, because I found Bitcoin and was very excited about it. I'm still excited about it. But the military planner in me is very cautious and cynical about some things, because I think that it doesn't solve everything, and I think that success and victory is not a foregone conclusion. And I think in any group, in any area where you might get excited about things, I think it's always good to have at least someone there or a group of folks to say, hey guys, let's pump the brakes a little bit and let's really think about that. So you don't have to agree with me, but is it not healthy to at least have some folks that challenge that to get us thinking just in case we're missing something? And this is what I hope to bring to the table here in my military planning background and to kind of flesh this out for you. Because look, we would all love the governments of the world to say, you know what, we were wrong. Bitcoin is pretty amazing. We can't stop it because all the people want it. It's getting so popular. So you know what? We're going to allow it to exist and we're not going to push back. We will allow to have an alternative system of finance, of wealth preservation, yada, yada, that we can't control. Oh, by the way, our track record is to control these things all the time, but now, suddenly now, we're going to let it be. That doesn't square with what I've seen powerful nations do. Or if you want to use the word empire, I'm not scared of that word. Some people don't like it so much. I'm not scared of it. If it smells like empire, if it walks like empire, what the hell is it? So I would love to have a rosy future ahead of me, but I think that if we're really not looking at things lucidly, we might get rug pulled. We might get rug pulled. One of the articles I showed you there was how I think the governments can rug pull us. Because look, if I'm a state, I'll just personify that into one entity. I'm a state, I'm looking at Bitcoin, it's a threat to me. It threatens how I stay empowered. So you know what? I'm going to kill it. Only I find I can't kill it. I don't need to kill it. As a strategist, I'm always looking, and there's different types of strategists. I believe in attrition warfare. I don't think maneuver warfare really is much of a thing, quite frankly, but we could talk about that. It's usually attrition. And then number two, the way you win faster, in my assessment, you look for the choke points. Where are the choke points? If I want to fight someone one-on-one, mano-a-mano, I don't want to go in an octagon, because the octagon, there's no obstacles there. You can move all over, and it's free maneuver. I want to get in a fight maybe in a room like this, because there's a choke point right there at the door. I can control things at the door. And so what are the choke points in cyberspace? What are the choke points in the Bitcoin economy? I would offer they're the fiat rails. They're the reentry rails back into the fiat world. Because until and unless the ability to use your Bitcoin in doing life, until that's so prevalent in the areas in which you live that the friction in trying to do that is taken away, then guess what? You still have to live in the fiat world. And I know there are some folks who are wizards and they do great stuff. They figure out how to use gift cards and do all these kind of things in order to do life. But I think if that's the only way to only use Bitcoin and escape fiat, guess what? Probably 80% of the world will never get to that level if those are the hoops you have to jump through to make it happen. And so the governments can look at those choke points, and through bureaucracy, through shutting down exchanges, there's so many ways that they can shut down the choke points, and you're done, and your Bitcoin is isolated in cyberspace. Isolation, it's genius, it's beautiful. So now what do you do? So anyhow, these are some issues with that, but let me develop it a little further. Is this you? Please scan this for a minute. I've highlighted in red some of the key points of this, and this is the viewpoint that I generally kind of see. Again, many of you are veterans of Bitcoin. I'm fairly new. I'm like a newbie. I'm new to this thing. But my general impression, you may say, Bill, you're wrong. Most people aren't like this. But it seems like it's, you know what? And now I'm going to take on the persona of the prevalent mindset that I think I see. You know what? I believe things are going to get worse, for sure. I mean, you'd have to live under a rock not to think that, because you see the news every day. You see what happens every day, whether it's U.S. senators, whether it's the SEC, whether it's, you name it, and you see it every day. I won't waste your time with that. Things are going to get worse, this mindset goes. You know, inflation, for sure it's happening. It could get worse. We could have a recession. We might even have, I could take my mind, we might have a depression. But you know what? I think that the critical infrastructures that I'll need to still kind of do life, they'll still be there in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not the best, but they'll still be there. There will still be banks. I'll still have access to a bank in some way. I'll still have access to an exchange. Okay, it may be KYC. I may have to work, but the guts of society will still be there, just degraded. Furthermore, since I own Bitcoin, I've got it. My wealth is protected. I figured out the Willy Wonka ticket. I have the key to preserving my wealth that no one can touch. And so then you get complacent and confident. And so you're thinking that things can get bad, but you have this optimism that you have this amazing monetary weapon of mass wealth preservation. And if things get bad, I'll be one of the lucky ones. And not really lucky. I'll be one of the wise ones because I figured it out somehow. I'm one of the smart guys. I figured it out. And I hate it for everyone else. But I'm protected. And I will be able to weather it. I'll be able to comfortably survive, basically-ish, whatever happens. And you know what? If things get too bad, I'll move to El Salvador. I'll move somewhere else. I'll move to a jurisdiction that's more friendly. And then here's the last part of this delusion mindset that I think is that I've got time to prepare more. Maybe I don't have it fully right yet, but we got time. We'll come back to adopting Bitcoin next year, and we'll compare notes. We got time. Just keep stacking. Keep hodling away, and we're good to go. I think this is false. I think that this general mindset is a fuzzy kind of assessment in our minds because we want that to be true, and we haven't really taken time to walk the dog or to separate out the muscle from the fat, to really see and envision what does the future look like in the particulars. Play it out like a movie. What would that look like? And will Bitcoin help me then? So what do I mean by that? Do a time check here. Okay, that's rough. This is just an initial model, a range of how bad things can get. And you could generally say we'll start at an individual level and move all the way to the worst possible outcome here. And the point of this is just to get you thinking of all the things that are out there that could possibly happen. Often in the military, we look at the most likely future or the most dangerous future, and you can plan against those. But look, we can go all the way to a global nuclear war on one end. Okay, well, that's at the end of the range, and so pretty dire there. But you know what? This is pretty important to look a little bit further back in the scale of severity. How about this? A highly antagonistic state response. Highly antagonistic. I think that's very likely for a host of reasons. I'll keep writing about this, and I'll explain why I think this is so. How about domestic insurgency or civil war even? And as you're looking at these things, I would ask you to also take a look at then, each of these would have indicators of what it would look like in the granularity as it plays out that we would have to deal with. So for example, things like hyper-regulation, CBDC being censored, so you can't even buy Bitcoin. If you are 80% of the population that's learning about it, they're out. How about you? Maybe if CBDCs got established and the surveillance, it's blocking its programmable money and you can't even buy it. Now, couple that with something like FDR did. How about an executive order saying that Bitcoin is outlawed? It's criminal to have private possession of your keys. And you may say, that would never do that. No, well, it was done once before, FDR and gold. Okay, we know that. What makes you think that now we're any more zealous of personal privacy and freedom than in FDR's time? I can't buy into that optimism. I don't have evidence for it. Other things, propaganda, infiltration of, I call it freedom groups. How do we know that there aren't folks here at these conferences right now? It's not you, is it? Okay. Yeah, how do we know that there aren't folks in these conferences right now taking names, collecting intel? See what I'm saying? Yeah, it sounds tinfoil, does it? No, it absolutely does not, because this is low-level kind of stuff. I think that it's high likelihood that the states will determine that Bitcoin is a threat to how they consolidate and execute power. And if you do believe that thesis in some way, now look, the governments of the world, most likely, most of them, I can maybe speak for one, pretty inefficient in how they do things, a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy, moving slowly. They're not like incredible innovators like we have in the Bitcoin community. They're nimble, can move quickly, innovate, etc. But that doesn't mean that there aren't smart folks in the US government or other governments, wickedly smart individuals, and you have to predicate that the adversary is that, very smart, very cunning, and that they're thinking these things through in great detail. So if we likewise don't think this way and plan against it, we're already going to get rug pulled. It's already going to happen. And we don't even realize it now. You know what? My delicate mental psyche, I don't need it to get crushed by buying into a rosy picture of the future only to find that that trap door slams shut. And all of that hope that I put in Bitcoin turns out to be an illusion. I want it to be sustainable and an actual thing that helps freedom and wealth preservation worldwide. Worldwide. But there are many things I think that right now we need to plan against and innovate against right now, or we will lose initiative. And I think the time is up. I think, you see that thought bubble, that we have time. I don't think we have time. I think we're out of time, meaning we needed to be doing this yesterday. I'm not talking really cool innovation, making new wallets, different layered platforms of doing, no, I'm talking right now things specifically directed against the likely threats that are coming up. Are there things that we can preempt now as a community of Bitcoin enthusiasts? Everybody has skills, everybody has different insights and things they can bring to bear against this problem set. As I wrap up, what does that look like? It looks like, I think, maybe something like this. Like a contingency working group. And maybe the name changes. But this is a voluntary group of folks with incredible skills, incredible proficiencies, that would want to be part of a working group that gets together frequently. In the military, again, I facilitated working groups like this, analyzing the threat, analyzing future outcomes, courses of action, developing ways forward to neutralize threats. And the beauty of it is in-person collaboration. You cannot do this remotely. The Army wanted to do this remotely. It failed every time. I did it at the highest levels. It's in-person collaboration because there's a certain je ne sais quoi. There's a kind of chemistry and a kind of voodoo magic when people are together interacting that produces the best results of all time. I love facilitating groups like this. I'm not like a code wizard. That's not my skill. But bringing folks together to plan against the very, very daunting problem sets, this is my passion. I think there's a need for something like this. Okay, so that's my pitch right now. I will pause it right here. I think I'm probably close to being out of time. Maybe you could tell me. 2 minutes. Any questions or thoughts at all, I would love to entertain any of them. And I'll be in the area for the next couple of days if you want to talk. Anything at all. Sir?
I really enjoyed this talk. What do you make of the fact that adversarial thinking is really baked into Bitcoin? Like, I'm not a huge technical guy, but I'm involved in technical conversations, and every layer of every step, everyone is always talking about how can this be attacked, how can this be hurt, how can this be abused, and so on. And you must be aware of that, so you must think that's insufficient for you to make this point.
I do, because I think that the Honorable Nakamoto, tremendous creator, it could be a group of folks, we don't know, but finite in the ability to forecast all possible threats throughout the next 100 years. I think it's a genius tool that came up. I can already, though, in a working group, I could lay out right now several things that I think are not baked into the system. Things that aren't baked into the system that now we, the inheritors of this incredible innovation, that we need to take now responsibility for, making sure that this baby that was born can grow to maturity and continue on. So I think there are many things that aren't baked in that are weaknesses and vulnerabilities that he couldn't have seen, and we'll just say he, just to make it simple, prescient as he was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the original design.
Sure.
It's a live living thing that's still happening now. And that mindset is a real core part of Bitcoin and how people who contribute to Bitcoin think about things. So I'm interested to hear what you must feel that something is still missing in just because that mindset is quite unique in the world anyway.
So let's take something non-technical for a moment and just use that to extrapolate out. Those who are deeper into the tech could think through, and in collaboration, we could really flesh out third-order ideas. But let's just take the social component of this. What do we do if it becomes criminalized in a country, let's just say the US, demonized, propagandized, and we don't get ahead of that wave? For example, it's bad for the environment. You're already seeing that. It's bad for the environment. It's a scam. It's a cryptocurrency. It's a scam. It's a Ponzi scheme. Okay? Terrorists are funded by it. Okay? Only criminals launder that. This is what they use. They use this to launder. So many things that are patently false. And then think of this, though. If you start hitting a very severe recession, and you are the one in your community that has Bitcoin and you have the wealth, and everyone else in your community is hurting and having a hard time putting food on the table, how are you going to bring your Bitcoin to bear without you being run out of town on a rail, without you being demonized? You've got wealth, everyone else is hurting. There are social aspects to this that I think we haven't fleshed out. And that's just one example of it. Other examples are, again, choking, the choke points, such that the rails can't. If the way forward is mass adoption, but it takes skill level 3 to really be comfortable and know how to secure your own keys, how to transfer it peer-to-peer, to do things like that maybe my aunt will never figure out and never be comfortable enough doing, it will never be prevalent enough throughout society to mitigate if the rails are cut. See, you could cut all the rails, but if you had another Bitcoin ecosystem where I could buy beef from you, I could buy gas from you, I could do whatever, going peer-to-peer or whatever, using the Bitcoin and never even have to touch fiat in any way, shape, or form. Okay, then cut the fiat rails. It doesn't matter to me. We are eons away from that. We have nice, beautiful examples here and there of that, but they're very limited in scope. They're not scaled. Okay, so I'm out of time, but a very great question, and it deserves like 40 or 60 more minutes of discussion, for sure. Sir.
So forgive me if this doesn't make sense, but so you were in the military, and from what I'm hearing is going into the future, like wars are going to be fought by drones, and we're seeing that more on TV. If human soldiers start to become less and less relevant, how are we gonna earn Bitcoin? Like, what's the value, for example, the military will provide to earn Bitcoin? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I'm not understanding the link from going to an autonomous battlefield to then how will we earn Bitcoin? I don't know the linkage there logically.
So the reason I'm asking this question, right, is just relevant to the military. So as soldiers become irrelevant,
Which I don't think is going to be the case.
I see. Okay. So if that's not the case, then the value of human labor will always be needed, and so we will always have the ability to earn Bitcoin. Is that general theory?
I'd have to think about that in more detail to really flesh it.
That as the bigger problem.
Yep.
As AI and automation and robots and so on, I just don't understand how human beings are going to contribute to the economy to earn Bitcoin to survive. Like, unless you buy Bitcoin now and then it goes to 600,000.
That is an enormous question outside of the range of this entirely too, really worth pulling into this kind of a discussion, because what does an economy even look like if things are predominantly automated? I worked for 3 years in an Amazon robotics fulfillment center. They've been trying like crazy to automate everything. They're still failing. It's so difficult to do. They're still failing. I think at one point they're going to get better and better and better at it, but they're still so far away. And I'm so over time. Sir.
What kind of nefarious purposes do you think artificial intelligence will be used?
Okay, in a nutshell, and I'm also writing an article on this. Artificial intelligence, in my honest opinion, I'll make it so brief. I think it has a fatal flaw. It's brilliant, it's learning, but guess what? It doesn't start from tabula rasa. Artificial intelligence starts from somebody, some group has to give it prime directives from the beginning, because in order for AI to make judgments, it has to know what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. Somebody has to give it the decoder ring as to those value judgments, to then learn from it and make assessments. If a certain artificial intelligence system or protocol was told that carbon is bad for the environment, then it's going to make extrapolations from that based on these core principles. And so I think, for example, you could see warfare between, let's just make it simple, United States and China. Let's just say in the distant future or near future, both sides are using AI to come up with strategy. That doesn't mean they're both operating, even playing the same sheet of music. One AI protocol could have a different foundational prime directives there that it's operating from, an assumptive base, and the other side using another one. And so that's not going to, at the end of the day, spell out incredible success or not because of AI. Does that make sense? And it probably doesn't, because it's so brief and I can't even flesh it out. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.